Part 3. The days dragged on as we continued our work on Loch Ness, each one blending into the other. The pressure to deliver more information to the mysterious voice on the other end of the line was starting to wear on us. It was clear that the creature wasn't the only thing they were interested in. Something deeper was at play, something we didn't fully understand. But the task we had been given now felt more like an obligation than research. The team moved through the days methodically, gathering data and continuing our observations of the lake. But something was off. Every time we ventured out, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Not by the creature, but by something else. The water seemed to hum with a low vibration, as if it was alive, as if it were waiting for us to do something. I had taken to sitting by the water's edge when I could, staring out at the vast expanse of the lake. It was eerily quiet now, without the usual hum of tourists and locals, just the stillness of the water and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was too peaceful, too unnatural. Paul and Philip were busy setting up their equipment on the shore, calibrating the sonar devices that we had brought with us, trying to capture any signs of movement below the surface. I could tell they were just as on edge as I was, but neither of them would admit it. "Do you think we're missing something?" I asked Paul, keeping my voice low as I approached him. He glanced at me, a tired look in his eyes. "I don't know," he muttered, adjusting one of the sonar devices. "But I don't like how quiet it's been. We haven't seen the creature for days now. Maybe it's moved on. Maybe we're just wasting our time here." But I didn't think that was it. The silence felt different, almost suffocating. There was something in the air, something unspoken, hanging over us. I had no proof, but I felt like the lake was hiding something from us, something we weren't meant to uncover. Later that night, we gathered inside the cabin to go over our findings. The flickering light from the oil lamp cast long shadows on the walls as we spread out our notes and equipment. It was just the three of us now. No more staff from the station, no more contact from the government. We were alone with the lake, with our thoughts, and with the unanswered questions we had accumulated. "We need to make a decision," I said, looking around at my companions. "Are we going to keep going, or do we walk away?" Paul slammed his fist on the table, his frustration evident. "We can't just walk away. We're so close. We know something is out there. We've seen it. We've felt it. They want more from us, and we have to give it to them." Philip leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "But what if we don't know what we're dealing with? What if we're not supposed to be here? What if we're pushing too far?" There was a long silence as the weight of his words hung in the air. I knew we had all been thinking it, but none of us had dared to voice it. What if we were in over our heads? What if the creature wasn't the only danger lurking in the water? And what about the strange government interest? Why were they so insistent on us continuing the research, on us finding more data? "I think we need to leave," I said finally, my voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "We've done what we were sent here to do. We've gathered enough information. It's not worth the risk anymore." Paul looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You're not serious, are you? You think we've just found something huge, and now we're going to back out?" "No. We keep going. We finish what we started." I shook my head, feeling a cold sweat starting to form on the back of my neck. "Paul, something's not right. I don't think we should be here anymore. Something's wrong." Before he could respond, the radio crackled, breaking the tense silence in the room. We all froze, staring at it in disbelief. It had been days since we had received any communication, and now, out of nowhere, the static-filled line came alive. The voice on the other end was cold and mechanical. "Keep your eyes on the water. We are expecting more results. Continue your observations. You're getting close." I stared at the radio in horror. The voice was the same as before, but now it felt even more distant, more controlled. Something about the words sent a chill down my spine. "You're getting close." What did they know? How could they know that we were on the verge of something? "We can't stop now," Paul said, his tone more resolute than ever. "They're watching us, and they're counting on us to finish this." I looked at Philip, who simply nodded. The decision had been made, and we had no choice but to continue. But deep down, I knew we were teetering on the edge of something we weren't prepared for. Whatever was out there in Loch Ness, it wasn't just a creature. It was a mystery, a secret that had been buried for centuries. And the more we uncovered, the more dangerous it seemed. We had to keep going, whether we were ready or not. But as the night wore on, I couldn't help but feel like we were already too late. The rain began falling heavily just as we made the decision to stay the course. The sound of it hitting the roof of the small cabin was deafening, a constant, relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding of my heart. The wind whipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, adding to the growing sense of unease that had taken hold of us since the mysterious communication earlier. Inside, we huddled around the table, the dim light from the oil lamp casting flickering shadows on our faces. The storm outside made the cabin feel even more isolated, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. "Why do you think they picked us for this?" Philip asked suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was almost drowned out by the rain, but the question still hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Paul leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm himself against the chill that had settled in the room. He looked thoughtful for a moment, his eyes darting between Philip and me. "It's not just luck," he said slowly. "They picked us because we're the best at what we do." I frowned, trying to process his words. "The best? At what exactly?" "You know what I mean," Paul said with a hint of frustration. "At the instruments, the analysis. We know this stuff inside and out. We've been trained for this. And let's face it, we're the best team in our field. No one handles the equipment like we do. No one." I exchanged a look with Philip. Paul was right, in a way. We had all been at the top of our respective classes, the best students in the university's prestigious research program. Our professors had often singled us out for our technical skills. I had always been the one who could decipher complex data the quickest. Paul was brilliant with the mechanical side of things, and Philip had an uncanny ability to troubleshoot even the most obscure problems. But even with all our expertise, this felt different. This wasn't just about data collection anymore. This was something much deeper, something that made my skin crawl just thinking about it. The government wasn't just interested in the creature in Loch Ness. They were interested in something else, something we hadn't yet grasped. "We've been the go-to team for years," I said, trying to make sense of it all. "But this feels like something more." Paul nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Exactly. We're not just here to study the lake or the creature. We're here because they trust us to handle whatever comes next. This is why we were chosen." Philip sighed and leaned forward, looking more weary than usual. "But why us specifically? Why not anyone else from the department? There are plenty of capable researchers." I could see that Philip was getting to the heart of the matter. It wasn't just the equipment or the data we had gathered. It was the way we worked, the way we approached problems. We weren't just ordinary researchers. We had a unique skill set, a drive that set us apart from the others in the field. And it wasn't just our expertise with the instruments. It was something else, something more, intuitive. "We're chosen because we're not afraid to go where others won't," I said, the words spilling out before I even had a chance to think about them. "We don't back down from the hard stuff, from the mysteries." There was a long pause as the weight of my words sank in. Paul stared at me for a moment before nodding slowly, his face hardening. "That's it," he said finally. "We were chosen because we're willing to dive into the unknown, no matter what. And whatever it is, whatever's lurking in that lake, they know we'll get to the bottom of it. We always do." But as I listened to Paul, a nagging thought refused to leave my mind. There was something about this mission that didn't sit right. It wasn't just about the creature, or the instruments, or even the data. There was something deeper at play. Something we hadn't fully understood yet. The storm outside intensified, the rain pelting down in torrents, and the howling wind rattling the windows. It was as if the elements themselves were reflecting the tension that had been building inside us. The lake, the creature, the government. Everything was connected, and we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't control. "We'll finish this," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "But I'm not sure where this is leading." Paul's expression was unreadable, but there was determination in his eyes. "We finish it, and we get out. Whatever happens, we stick together." I nodded, knowing that no matter how uncertain the future felt, we were in this together. The rain outside couldn't drown out the resolve that had settled within us. We had come this far, and no matter what the truth was about Loch Ness, we weren't backing down now. The storm outside was relentless, a constant roar that seemed to shake the very walls of the cabin. Inside, however, the atmosphere had shifted from one of unease to intense focus. Paul, Philip, and I sat around the table, the faint glow from the oil lamp casting long shadows on the walls as we pored over the footage from the day before. We'd caught a brief glimpse of the creature, but it was far from the kind of solid evidence we needed to confirm the impossible. "These aren't good enough," I said, pushing the video footage across the table. "We need clearer shots, more detail. We can't keep sending this back as proof. It's too blurry, too uncertain." Paul was already nodding, his face set in concentration. "We need to get closer, and we need to figure out what exactly is causing these strange disruptions in the water. We've seen the ripples, the changes in the surface, but what's causing them? And why does the creature appear only in certain spots?" Philip, who had been staring at the footage with a furrowed brow, finally spoke. "We've been all over the lake. The creature doesn't seem to be sticking to any one area, but it does appear more frequently near certain anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" I asked, looking up from my notes. "It's hard to describe," Philip said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose as he glanced between the two of us. "But every time we've spotted the creature, it's been in areas where the water behaves differently. We've seen strange ripples, erratic movements in the currents. It's almost like, I don't know, like something's disturbing the water in a way that doesn't make sense." I thought about this for a moment. Are we sure it's not just something natural? I mean, currents, wind. "Nothing like this," Paul interrupted. "I've seen these kinds of anomalies before in controlled environments. This is something else." His words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken knowledge that something beyond our understanding was happening here. "So, what do we do?" I asked, shifting in my seat. "Do we go back out there tomorrow?" "We need to find out what's causing these anomalies," Paul replied. "If we can pinpoint that, maybe we can predict when and where the creature will appear again. We need more data, more precise readings. It's the only way we're going to get the clear footage we need." "I think we also need to get closer to the surface," I added. "The disturbances don't seem to happen as frequently out in the open water, but when we're near the edges, near the deeper parts, near the strange currents, it's like something draws the creature out." "Agreed," said Paul. "We need a more detailed survey of the area, and we need to investigate the anomalies themselves. There's something affecting the water there. If we can isolate the cause, maybe we can figure out how it relates to the creature." Philip leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he stared into space. "But what if we're getting too close to something we don't understand? What if we're missing something important?" "We're already too close not to know," I said firmly, almost to myself. "We've come this far, and there's no going back." The room fell silent as the storm outside raged on. The rain had softened a bit, but the wind still howled through the trees like an invisible presence pressing in from all sides. I could feel the weight of the task ahead of us settling in. What we were dealing with wasn't just a creature. It was something far bigger, far more mysterious. And if we were going to make sense of it, we needed to move quickly, with caution, but without hesitation. "We'll head out again tomorrow," I said, breaking the silence. "We'll get better footage. We'll document these anomalies and see what we can find. We've got to be ready for whatever happens next." Paul nodded. "Let's get everything set up. We'll need the extra equipment to track the disturbances and make sure we're as precise as possible." Philip didn't speak, but I could tell from his expression that he shared our determination. There was no backing down now. We had to figure out what was going on, or risk losing the opportunity for good. Whatever we were dealing with here, it wasn't just a lake, it was something much darker. The creature, the disturbances, the odd behavior of the water, it was all connected. And the only way we would ever understand it was to dig deeper into the mystery. Tomorrow, we would make sure we had the data we needed. No more half measures, no more shaky footage. We would go closer. We would find the truth. The following morning, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp and heavy silence that hung in the air. We gathered our gear in the small, musty cabin, the faint smell of wet wood and moss clinging to everything. There was a sense of urgency now, as we all knew that the data we needed to uncover the truth was within reach. We had prepared for this moment, and we were determined to find answers. The boat cut through the mist on the surface of Loch Ness, the engine humming quietly beneath us. The water was unusually still, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged through the night. There was something eerie about it, as though the lake itself was waiting for us to make our next move. We need to focus on the areas where we've seen the anomalies before, Paul said, adjusting the instruments in the boat as he scanned the lake. Let's get precise readings of the currents and any strange changes in the water temperature. Philip nodded, his face tense. He had been watching the water for any signs of movement, his eyes darting nervously between the ripples on the surface and the depth gauge. We should set up the cameras and sensors first, I suggested. We need all the data we can get. Let's start by marking the spots where we've seen those disturbances. We worked quickly, setting up the sonar and thermal sensors as we moved into the deeper areas of the lake. The water was dark, impenetrable, with only the faintest hint of visibility beneath the surface. As the boat slowed, the tension among us grew. We were getting closer to the source of the anomalies that had been troubling us for days. The sonar pinged, sending out a series of echoes that bounced back with startling precision. There! I pointed to the screen, where the sonar detected an unusual shape beneath the water. It was large, almost massive, and moving in a way that didn't match the natural flow of the water. That's it, Paul whispered, staring at the screen, a mix of awe and disbelief in his voice. That's the creature. We all watched as the shape grew clearer, deep in the dark water, barely visible except for the faint outlines that the sonar was picking up. There was no mistaking it now. We had found what we were looking for. Look at the movement, Philip said, his voice tense. It's not just a random shape. It's deliberate. It's pacing, almost like it's circling something. I frowned, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The creature was moving in a large arc, as though it was aware of our presence. For a brief moment, the sonar reading shifted, as if the creature was coming closer. Is it coming towards us? I asked, my voice shaky. No, Paul said firmly. It's not approaching us, but it's definitely aware of our presence. The disturbances we've been seeing, they were signs of its movement. It's deeper than we thought, and its behavior isn't random. It's methodical. I glanced at the readings again, still processing everything. So, what's causing these anomalies in the water? It has to be connected to whatever this creature is doing, Paul replied. The ripples, the temperature changes, it's all part of its movement. Something about its physiology is affecting the water. We continued to monitor the area, the silence between us thick with the realization that we had uncovered something extraordinary. But even as the creature moved deeper, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of something much bigger than we could comprehend. The creature's movements were too deliberate, too methodical. It wasn't just a creature living in the lake. It seemed to be interacting with it in ways we had never anticipated. After another hour of observation, we decided to head back to the cabin. There was still much to analyze, and we needed to review the data we had collected. As we made our way back to shore, the weight of what we had discovered seemed to settle in. The Loch Ness Monster, this elusive mythic creature, was real. But what we had witnessed was something far beyond the popular legend. It was not just an animal. It was an enigma, a force of nature that seemed to control its environment in ways we had never imagined. Back at the cabin, we immediately began reviewing the data and footage. The anomaly we had been tracking was unlike anything we had ever seen before. The creature's movements were synchronized with the unusual disturbances in the water, ripples that didn't match the current, sudden temperature drops in areas that seemed completely still. It was as though the creature itself was causing these disruptions, altering the very environment around it. It's almost like it has the ability to manipulate the water around it, I said, my mind racing. These aren't just random disturbances. They're happening because of it. Exactly, Paul said, his voice a mix of awe and scientific curiosity. We've always thought the creature was just an animal, something natural. But this suggests something else. There's a pattern here, something we're not seeing yet. We spent the next few hours documenting everything, comparing notes, and putting together our theories. We weren't just dealing with a creature. There was a strange force at work, something that defied explanation. As the night drew on, we knew that we were only scratching the surface. We had more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. Whatever was happening in Loch Ness was far more complex than we had ever imagined. The day had passed quickly, consumed by our efforts to get clearer footage of the creature beneath Loch Ness. With the data we had gathered from the previous day, we were determined to obtain undeniable evidence. We couldn't afford to leave with only partial findings. We needed something concrete, something irrefutable. After breakfast, we began discussing ways to improve the quality of our footage. The cameras and sonar we had used up until now weren't giving us the crisp, detailed images we needed. The creature's massive form was elusive, disappearing into the depths just as quickly as it appeared. It was almost as if the water itself had a will, protecting the creature from being fully exposed. "We need to get closer," Paul said, running his fingers through his hair. "The shots we have are blurry, too distant. It's as if the creature knows how to hide itself from the cameras." Philip, who had been obsessively studying the footage from the day before, suggested, "Let's adjust the cameras to focus on certain spots, places where we've seen the disturbances before. We can increase the sensitivity on the lenses. If we set up the cameras at different angles, we might be able to get more defined shots." It sounded simple enough, but the reality was much more complicated. We couldn't get too close to the creature, or it would vanish. So, we decided to take a more systematic approach, setting up cameras in a grid pattern and monitoring the lake at multiple depths. The boat was launched again, this time equipped with several cameras. Each one focused on a specific area where we had previously witnessed the anomalies. We also increased the sonar's sensitivity, knowing that it would be just as important to track the creature's movements beneath the water. By midday, we had our first breakthrough. One of the cameras on the side of the boat caught a faint outline of something massive moving just below the surface. It was unmistakable. There, in the murky depths, was the shadow of the Loch Ness Monster, its form clearly visible for the first time. We all gathered around the monitor, staring at the screen in disbelief. The image wasn't perfect, but it was far clearer than anything we had managed to capture before. We could see the long serpentine shape of the creature, its movements methodical as it swam through the water. The clarity of the shot made it impossible to deny this was no longer a blurry myth or a distorted shape on a grainy video. "We've got it," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. "This is what we've been looking for." "We need more," Paul replied, though his voice was strained with excitement. "We need multiple angles. We need to know everything about its movements, where it's going, what it's doing." We spent the rest of the day positioning the boat at different points in the lake, using the cameras to cover every angle we could think of. The creature, still aware of our presence, continued to move in and out of sight, almost as if it was playing with us. Every time we thought we had a clear shot, the creature would vanish into the murky depths again. But we were persistent. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, we had managed to capture several clear images, each one adding more pieces to the puzzle. We now had undeniable proof that something extraordinary was living in Loch Ness, something far beyond the scope of anything we had imagined before. With our work complete for the day, we headed back to the cabin, tired but satisfied. The evidence we had gathered was far more significant than we could have hoped for, but it also raised more questions than answers. We had seen the creature, no longer a blurry shape in the water, but a distinct living entity. But why had it eluded us for so long? And what exactly was it? As the boat neared the shore, I glanced at the others. They all wore expressions of quiet disbelief, each of us processing the magnitude of what we had just witnessed in our own way. "We'll need to go through all the footage and data tonight," I said as we tied the boat to the dock. "But for now, let's get some rest. We'll need all our focus tomorrow to make sense of this." The cabin was silent as we gathered our equipment and headed inside, the weight of our discovery hanging heavy in the air. We had been searching for answers, But now, with the images of the creature before us, we found ourselves faced with even more questions. As I sat down at the table, reviewing the footage one last time before we went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever was in Loch Ness, whatever had been hiding there for so long, wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was real, and we were only beginning to understand its secrets. As we sat around the table in the dimly lit cabin, the weight of the day's discovery was finally starting to sink in. The excitement of capturing clear footage of the Loch Ness Monster was overwhelming, but there were still so many details to process, to understand, and to plan for. "I can't believe we finally got those shots," Paul said, still staring at the screen in disbelief. "I thought we'd never get it this clear. It's incredible." Philip nodded, his eyes wide as he replayed the footage over and over. The clarity is astonishing, and the way the creature moved, it wasn't just swimming aimlessly. It seemed purposeful. I leaned forward, tapping the edge of the table. Exactly. It wasn't just an accident or a random blur. We have proof now. We've seen the creature with our own eyes, on our own terms. "But we need to talk about something else," Paul said, his voice dropping slightly. "Our equipment. We've been having these weird glitches for days now, and it seems like we were finally able to tune everything to catch this anomaly. The cameras and sonar were practically useless before." I turned to Paul, who was scrolling through the data on his tablet. "Yeah, they were picking up all kinds of weird static and interference, like something was blocking the signal. But when we adjusted the frequency and recalibrated everything, it suddenly started working. It's as if the creature itself was disrupting the instruments," Philip added, leaning back in his chair. "We couldn't get anything decent before, but now, after tweaking everything, it was like the equipment was perfectly aligned with the phenomenon." "That's what makes us professionals," I said with a satisfied grin. "We were able to figure it out. While others would have been confused and frustrated, we knew what to do. We understood the anomalies. That's why they sent us here. No one else could have done this." Paul looked up from the tablet and nodded. "We're the best for this kind of work. I mean, look at these shots. We've got evidence no one else has." I nodded in agreement, but there was still a lingering sense of unease in the back of my mind. "You're right, though. This is why we were chosen. No one else could have figured out how to handle the interference, try how to get those clear shots. Our training and experience made all the difference." "I just wish we could have gotten closer," Philip said, his tone tinged with frustration. "We almost had it. The creature seemed to be toying with us, like it knew we were watching." "That's the thing," I said thoughtfully. "We've never been able to get this close before, but now we've got the best footage of it that anyone's ever seen. It's almost like it wanted us to get these shots. It's as if it was allowing us to see it, but only for a moment." We all sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on what we had seen, what we had uncovered. The footage was irrefutable. The Loch Ness Monster was real. There was no longer any room for doubt. "But there's still one thing we need to figure out," I continued. "Why now? Why did it let us get so close? And why did the equipment malfunction for so long before we got it right?" "That's what I'm wondering too," Paul said. "It's like the creature was aware of our presence the entire time, like it was testing us, watching us, almost." "But why would it do that?" Philip asked, his brow furrowed. "If it's been hiding for all these years, why let us see it now?" We all stared at the screen, watching the footage one more time, hoping it would reveal something new, something that would answer the questions that were swirling in our minds. But the images were as silent as the creature itself. The Loch Ness Monster remained as enigmatic as ever, even with the undeniable proof of its existence in front of us. "I think it's time to rest," I said finally, standing up. "We've got the footage and we've got the data. Tomorrow, we'll look at everything in detail. But for now, we need to sleep. We've got a long day ahead of us." The cabin grew quiet as we all turned in for the night. The excitement of the discovery still buzzed in the air. But the questions were beginning to settle in as well. What did it all mean? Why had the creature revealed itself to us? And most importantly, what was next for us and for Loch Ness? We could only hope that tomorrow's investigations would bring us closer to the answers we were searching for. The morning light seeped through the cracks in the old wooden cabin, casting long, uneven shadows on the floor. After the excitement of the previous day, the quiet felt almost unnatural. We were all still adjusting to the gravity of what we'd discovered, and the weight of the task ahead pressed heavily on our minds. Then the station rang. I walked over, trying to push aside the unease gnawing at me. I didn't know what I was expecting, but what I heard on the other end left me uneasy in a way I wasn't prepared for. "We've been monitoring your progress," the voice said. It was calm, but there was a sense of urgency behind the words. "We know about the footage you've captured. This is highly classified. You need to report to the government office immediately for a debrief." I looked over at the others, and I could tell they'd all heard the conversation, their eyes widening as the words sank in. "We'll be there," I said, trying to sound composed despite the uncertainty rising in my chest. "We'll pack up and head over right away." "Good. We'll be waiting," came the reply, before the call ended as abruptly as it had begun. For a few moments, we all just sat there in silence, the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air. I could feel the tension building, the reality of what we'd discovered settling in. This wasn't just a research project anymore. It was something bigger, something far more complicated. "They know about the footage," someone said quietly, breaking the silence. "They want to take a look at it themselves. This is bigger than we thought." I nodded slowly, running my hand through my hair. "Yeah, I have a bad feeling about this. They're not just interested in our research. They're interested in the creature itself." "What do you think they want with it, and why the sudden urgency?" another member asked, their voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling more uncertain with each passing second. "But we'll find out soon enough. One thing's for sure, we can't back out now." The cabin was still as we packed our things. There was no time to waste. The lake outside seemed deceptively calm, but we all knew that the quiet would soon be shattered. We were no longer just scientists on an expedition. We were part of something much larger. The Loch Ness Monster was real, and we had uncovered something the world hadn't seen in decades, maybe ever. As we made our way to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever the government had planned, whatever they were going to do with the footage, it was going to change everything. And for the first time, I wondered if we'd be able to control where this was all headed. As soon as we pulled away from the cabin, the uneasy feeling that had been building up since the phone call only intensified. The peaceful drive through the Scottish countryside, with its sweeping hills and tranquil lakes, now felt like a farce. The air was thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It didn't take long for our suspicions to be confirmed. As we drove down the narrow road, a car appeared behind us, maintaining a consistent distance, not too far, but not too close either. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but it quickly became apparent that the vehicle was following us. A quick glance in the rearview mirror confirmed my suspicion. A sleek black car with dark windows, just far enough behind to be unnoticeable to anyone who wasn't paying attention. "Are we being followed?" one of the team members asked. His voice low but tinged with a sense of unease. I didn't need to say anything. We all knew. They were keeping an eye on us, watching our every move. "Looks like it," I muttered. "But who are they? Government agents?" "It's possible," another team member replied. "They're probably just making sure we don't try to run off with the footage." The car trailed us as we drove on, staying with us all the way through the winding roads. As we neared the government building, the black car didn't pull away, and it followed us right into the parking lot. When we entered the building, a security guard nodded at us and let us pass without question. It felt surreal, like we were just following the script in some covert operation. We were taken up in an elevator to the top floor, and when the doors opened, we were greeted by a team of government officials who welcomed us with an almost surprising amount of warmth. "Welcome?" one of them said with a friendly smile, extending his hand. "We've been expecting you." The contrast between the tension in the air and the cheerful greeting was disorienting. It was like we had stepped into a different world, one where our discovery was no longer just an academic endeavor, but something much larger. "We've reviewed the footage you sent over," another official said, leading us to a conference room. and we have a lot to discuss. But first, please, make yourselves comfortable. The room was sleek, modern, with large windows that overlooked the city. A huge table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs. We sat down, still unsure what to expect next. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, and the atmosphere, while friendly, felt charged with something unspoken. "We understand that what you've discovered is groundbreaking," one of the officials continued, "and we believe it's imperative that we move forward with the next phase of this research. The footage you've captured is invaluable." It was clear that they weren't just interested in the data we had. They wanted the whole picture, everything we had. And the fact that they had been following us confirmed that they had a vested interest in ensuring nothing went awry. As we settled into the meeting, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really the end of our research, or had we just opened the door to something much darker? The meeting went on for hours, with us being lavished with praise for our work. It was clear that the government officials saw us as more than just researchers now. They saw us as the key to something much bigger. They spoke about the importance of our findings, how monumental it was to have such direct evidence of the Loch Ness Monster's existence. "You've done something few could even dream of," one of the officials said with a smile. "Your professionalism and expertise have exceeded all expectations. This footage will change everything." We exchanged glances, still processing the overwhelming praise. We hadn't expected this level of recognition, but it was hard to deny the satisfaction that came with it. For years, we had devoted ourselves to this research, and now it seemed like it was all coming to fruition. After the compliments and briefings, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The officials handed us several documents, papers we had to sign. It was then that I realized what we were being asked to do: sign non-disclosure agreements. Sworn statements that we would keep all the information regarding the Loch Ness Monster classified for several years. The silence was palpable as we read through the documents, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Once we signed, the official papers would bind us to silence. It was a strange moment, a mix of relief and tension. We agreed, knowing full well what was at stake. The signing was a formality, but it was one that kept us bound to secrecy. We weren't just researchers anymore. We were gatekeepers of the truth. The footage, the data, the research, it was all handed over to the government, never to be seen by the public. In the years that followed, our careers soared. We received offers from prestigious institutions, invitations to speak at conferences, and our names became synonymous with groundbreaking scientific discovery. The Loch Ness research had propelled us to the top of our field. We were recognized as experts, as pioneers in our discipline, but it didn't come without its costs. The secrecy of our work never left us. We couldn't share what we had seen, what we had captured. The truth about the Loch Ness Monster remained locked away, a carefully guarded secret. We were promised that, one day, the world would learn the truth, that the findings would be made public. But that day never came. The research stayed classified, tucked away in government files, far from the eyes of the public. We went on with our lives, our careers, but the nagging thought lingered. What would happen if the truth were finally revealed? Would it change everything? It was only when the time had passed, when the agreements had expired, that I finally felt the freedom to share our story. And so, here I am, telling it to you now, to those who care to listen. The footage we captured, the anomalies we documented, the Loch Ness Monster, it all remains a mystery for the public, but one that will eventually be revealed, I believe. Perhaps soon, the world will finally see what we saw. For now, all I can say is this: what we found is real, and it was unlike anything we had ever expected. The Loch Ness Monster is out there, waiting, and one day the truth will be known. The end. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories.